Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lorie Hartshorn, and I'm delighted to be with you this week. Learning so much over here at The Perspective, and I hope that as you watch each show that you're gaining a fresh perspective on things. One of my favorite things is actually the church. And I am so grateful for the actually having the privilege of being raised in a church where I saw both men and women serving God and loving people and actually inviting me, even as a young girl, to step into some of the gifts that God had given me. Times have changed. There isn't always been the same opportunity for women to lead in the church setting. But you know what? However, we serve the Lord, God uses us, right? It's not about a position or a title. And I just know that when we serve in the church, we're serving God. When we serve outside the church, we're serving God. We're going to meet a beautiful guest today, Lindsay Callaway. She's been with the EFC since 2019 and works as a researcher for the Center for Research on the church and faith. And she's contributed to various studies from the Parenting Faith Study and the Significant Church Study. And she's the co host of the Faith Trends podcast. I love that. She also conducted other studies, and we're going to learn more today. But I'm just delighted to have Lindsay as a young woman who is leading the way. So, welcome to The Perspective, Lindsay. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us more about who you are, Lindsay, and why do you care about research, especially, regarding faith and even the church?
As you said, I've been with the EFC for 5 years. My background is actually in theology, but I've really honed the research skills and learned a lot in my role with the EFC. And I think it's important for somebody who's collecting and analyzing research about the church that it's being done by somebody who's a part of and actually understands the church at the same time. So I think it's important to have Christians in the research world so that we have that insider perspective. And
I
I often think of Luke's gospel. It opens with him stating that he's carefully investigating and drawing up an account. And so I really look to Luke as a bit of my inspiration as a researcher. We want to draw up an account. We want to carefully investigate. And just draw up something that is going to be relevant and important and useful for the church.
I just love that, Lindsay. I just think facts are our friends. When we learn more about any topic in our life, they are our friends to help move us forward. And well, you're heading up a study about how Canadian Christian women understand their role and participate in the local church. And what are you hoping to accomplish with this?
Yes, so I'm the lead researcher of a study called Women in the Canadian Evangelical Church. And we really want to understand just that, as you stated, how do women understand their own roles within the church, how they understand their contributions, and then what are they doing? And so we're hoping to accomplish just simply an establishing of understanding the what is of women in the Canadian Evangelical Church. And actually, we've had 14 other organizations and ministries partner with us around this question because, as you said, facts can be our friends. And so if all we're basing our decisions off of our assumptions or anecdotes. Sometimes those aren't an accurate reflection of reality. So, research gives us the opportunity to put some hard data behind those assumptions, behind those anecdotes, and sometimes they confirm what we've always thought we've known, or they can challenge what we thought we knew, and then we can make wise decisions in response to that.
That's really helpful, Lindsay, because I know we all have our own experience and we can assume that our experience is everyone else's experience. So I just really appreciate this actually healthy, holistic approach to understanding a better understanding of where the diversity of women's experience. So, where are women engaged in the church in Canada? Like, what are women doing? And can you share some of the stories or examples that you're discovering?
Absolutely. So the easy question is women are engaged in all areas. But the way I'll answer this question really depends on who we interviewed. So we're still in the process of doing our research. And I would say we've only just completed the preliminary phases of research. And part of that preliminary process is interviewing experts, people who have this bird's eye view of the landscape of women in the church. So there are people in positions of leadership, they're academic leaders, they're denominational leaders, they're pastors, they're women's ministry directors, and they're seeing the forest essentially. And so we talked to these people and we said, where are women serving? And we realized that a lot of them were leading with women in leadership. These are the ways that we see women in very public facing roles. But I think we all know that women serve in a whole lot more ways. And so we wanted to kind of push them and say, you led with leadership. Are there other ways that women are serving? And that's when the floodgates opened with all these amazing ways that women are serving. There was childcare and food preparation and education, administration. Prayer was a huge part of that as well. Women seem to be prayer warriors. And so we really want to not only put a spotlight on where women are leading in the front facing ministries, but also where they're serving and participating and contributing in some of the background behind the scenes ways as well. And we want to hold it out as they're all very valuable contributions. And so the easy answer, like I said, is in so many ways, but we hope to learn more from women as we continue our research.
I really appreciate that, Lindsay. I think sometimes you have to be careful what you measure, right? And if you're asking the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. And
Mm,
sometimes as women, I think we can have a narrative that if women aren't in a position or have a title of leadership, then they're not making an impact. And Lindsay, I can tell you from my own life experience that that just isn't true. I've held titles of leadership, and yet if I were honest with you, I would say sometimes with a title and role of a leader, you have your sphere of influence, your circle of impact, but it's those people who are on the front lines, and that can be serving the poor, that can be leading those small groups, that can be in the prayer ministry, that I see they are having a dynamic impact. So I really appreciate you saying, let's be careful how we measure this. Would you say that that's what you're discovering is just the multiple layers in which we lead and let's not heighten one as more important than another?
absolutely, absolutely. And I spoke with a pastor and he said, I feel kind of pressured to valorize these public facing roles that women contribute to because the culture, he feels pressured by the culture to only talk about women in leadership. And so we want to kind of diffuse that, especially in the church, and talk about women's contributions much more generally and to focus on the huge spectrum and to make sure that women are feeling supported and like they can use their gifts in whatever avenue that is.
Yeah. Well, the definition of leadership for me is leadership is influence. And
Mm.
you can be a leader as a mom, as a friend, as a neighbor, as leading that small ministry where you have 3 or 4 women you're gathering with. I mean, we have to be very careful how we measure leadership because I believe when we go to answer to Jesus, he does see our heart in what we serve. There's no titles or role badges given out. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes, absolutely.
I'm really glad that you have that frame of reference in mind because I think that deeply encourages women that may not hold a microphone or stand in a public facing role to know that what they're doing matters. Have you found any factors that are impacting how women participate in the church?
Yes. So we're actually seeing quite a shift in the last few decades in how women are participating in the church. And a huge part of that, as I'm sure many people can guess, is women having to having employment outside of the home. And sometimes that's due to economic strain, sometimes that's due to desire. But this is changing, especially how ministries are being structured. We spoke with some pastors, and they said that they've had to completely re envision what summer ministries look like, especially for children, because they used to be able to depend on this large volunteer base of women volunteers. And now so much of that base is now working full time. And Some of it, like I said, is due to that higher cost of living, and they're requiring families need to have that second income. So churches are seeing ministries shut down because they can't rely on that volunteer base anymore. That used to be the women who were at home and taking the charge and leading those ministries, and so we're seeing shifts there. There's also some shifts where women only perceive that they can only serve to a certain degree. There's a ceiling, a contribution ceiling, and so sometimes that will also affect if a woman stays in the church. And the other thing is lack of relational depth. So whether that's due to just changes from the pandemic, or if women are just struggling to feel plugged in or to feel like they have a friend or somebody that they can talk to and be vulnerable with, that's going to affect whether women are going to stay and participate in a given church.
Boy, they are very significant factors. I think we could unpack each one of those if we had more time. We're going to take a break. We're going to come right back and we're going to just keep learning from Lindsay here. We'll be right back. Well, we're right back, and we're going to continue our conversation with Lindsay. I love this whole approach of research, Lindsay. I think it's going to be very encouraging to women. You mentioned one of the factors that has changed women's involvement in the church just before the break being, economic factors. And that is a very significant thing, isn't it? Because the church relies on volunteers, and women at different stages have been primarily more available than men. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, would you say that that really is coming forward in this research?
Yes, so far, at least according to the leaders that we've interviewed, that seems to be the biggest thing that they've noticed is, there's been this big shift in who's available to volunteer and take over some of these ministries that they've relied on volunteers to do. So that seems to be the concern of leaders, and that's all the population that we've talked to so far. So we hope in our next phase of research to speak with women and learn a little bit more about the nitty gritty of what they're doing and why they're not serving in other ways. So there's still a lot to be learned, but it does seem, really it's unprecedented in history. It used to be that it was a luxury to stay home. Um, and now it seems like for people who maybe want more luxury in their lifestyle, it's actually for them to be working to have that dual income. So we saw different ways of leaders talking about it. Some said, people just want a luxurious lifestyle, so they're doing the women are working, so they have that dual income. They have more money to spend. But other people, and it tended to be the women we spoke with, they're the ones who said, no, listen, the cost of living is so high. I have to work in order for my family to survive. So this is what I'm doing. So it seems like the reason for pursuing employment and that economic strain was evaluated differently by different people, but it was a theme.
And it is a factor. You only have so much bandwidth. I know myself, when I was home raising my kids, I had the privilege of being home for a few years. I had more to give to the church, more time available. When I worked full time as a teacher, I only had so much bandwidth. It's really
Right.
understandable, right? So, who are you hoping will benefit from this research? And is it just for women?
That's right. So, while the study is about women, we keep saying the research is for everyone, and we believe that the whole church will benefit if women are flourishing and we understand how they're contributing and we can support them in that. And so, I would hate for somebody to walk away going, "Oh, this is just for women. That's not for me." No, it's actually for the good of the church. And when we think about the gender wars are often cited as something that is really contentious as an issue outside and inside of the church. So if this research can be a tool in helping have that discussion and make bridge those conversations with grace and understanding, then I think that will contribute to the whole church's flourishing more generally as we take this time to do a deep dive into women.
So good, Lindsay. As we said, facts are our friends, right? So we
That's right.
really, we really will benefit from this. Let me ask you, what are some challenges and opportunities for the church in Canada regarding women?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, that anecdotes and assumptions can be barriers to making wise and informed decisions in the church. And so I think a lot of women have varied experiences, and we don't want to paint with broad strokes. We want to be able to take the time to listen to the diverse landscape of women's experiences in the church in Canada. And then what we do is we can measure the prevalence of those experiences through surveys, and we hope to just gain an understanding of what the landscape looks like. Where are women? What are they doing? What are they thinking? And how do they understand their place in the church? And really, we're not trying to push any sort of agenda or extract a theology or extract any sort of strategies for church growth or to mobilize more volunteers. We are looking for understanding. What is? That's really the simple goal and aim of this research is just understanding. And so and then maybe in a response, once we gain that understanding, we can adjust some structures as we see things changing. We are already seeing it in the volunteer base. So how can we maybe re-envision ministry and what it looks like to run a given church with this understanding of what women are doing, where they are, and what they're thinking.
That's so good, Lindsay. I really appreciate this dialogue. I appreciate that people, both men and women, are being called to the table to have the conversation, to answer the what is. I mean, times always change, not just now,
Hmm.
they always change. And the church and the way God works, same message, but different, different methodology often. So, bravo to you and the team at the EFC to have this conversation because I do believe it will help guide teams. I think it's going to bring encouragement to women and to men. And to be
Hmm.
able to step forward. What the research is still in process, I understand. Just from a, I don't know how you do all this, but how long does something like this take?
Yes, it takes about 2 years. If we ever everything is working well, it could be about a year and a half. If things are not working so well, it can be about 3 years, but our research projects take about 2 years. We start with a really partnership-led process where we come around a question and we talk about what's already being done, who's already talking about this, and then we form a partnership. So it's not just the EFC promoting something, it's actually a bunch of ministry organizations, churches, denominations, theological education institutions, places and people who have an interest in this question. And we come around a question and we form a research partnership. And then we do what's called a literature review. We look at what's already being done, what do we know already about the topic, and then we start to interview these leaders, these people with this bird's eye perspective, and then we interview our primary population, which in our case is women. And we are about to enter that phase of studies, so we're really excited to start that process. And then, as I mentioned too, then we'll do a survey which tests the prevalence of what we're finding. And then it'll all be packaged in a final report, which will be out in about a year, we're hoping.
That is simply amazing. I mean, I couldn't do what you do. So, bravo to you and the team for doing this. And I just think this is another example of unity in the church as Jesus prayed that we would be one. And so I think this is important that as Canadians hear this and watch this, to know that we need to be united in this conversation. Are there any next steps or any encouragement to our viewers today in regards to what you're learning?
Yes, so the next step is to actually interview women. So I'm hoping if some viewers are sitting and watching this and thinking, I really hope my story is shared, that we want to hear from you. So you can sign up to hear more about the study and be contacted for a potential interview. And that's at theefc.ca/women-in-church, women in church. And we hope to hear from women. The next part, in the last phase of interviews, we spoke with women and men leaders. Um, But now we want to speak to just women and hear the breadth of the stories that women in the Canadian Evangelical Church have to share. And we're so honored. I'm so honored that I have this opportunity to hear from women and to be able to steward their stories for the betterment and the growth of the church. It's a real honor and a privilege to do this work.
Well, bravo to you. I sign me up, okay? I would be happy to share my story. We'll put that link up for people so they can see that. And I'd say, let's do this. Let's rise up. Let's share our story so that we can contribute to the narrative and the learning and the what's up in Canada so we know where God is at work and what he wants to do next. Thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today. It's been a real privilege to learn from you.
Thank you so much, Lorie.
We'll be right back. Do you ever have questions in your life about who you are? Maybe you're in an identity crisis. We've all been there. It's part of the human experience. Do I have value? Do I have worth? What is my purpose in life? Well, I believe this is a very significant question to be answered. And I've written a book called Found. My name's Lorie Hartshorn, and I want to invite you on a journey of discovering your true identity. I want to lead you not only through my book, but through an 8-part video series where you can even gather with others and learn and discuss together about the truth of our identity, the beauty of it, and the freedom that we find when we are connected to Jesus. See, I believe that we lost our identity back in the beginning in the garden, and I want to unpack for you how Jesus, he restores it all. You can find your true identity in him. So why don't you come with me on this journey of discovering your true identity, your value and worth, and let's grow and learn together. Found. You can know that what was lost, it's all been found in Jesus. In today's world, we're constantly encouraged to seek instant gratification, right? Whether it's the latest fashion, a new car, or a fresh news story, everything is fleeting. We're caught up in a culture that values what's new and immediate. And if something doesn't meet our desires, well, we just discard it and move on to the next thing. But there's a danger in this mindset, isn't there? If we live for the temporary, we risk missing out on something far deeper and more enduring. Faithfulness. You see, faithfulness, on the other hand, well, it's not about what's immediate. It's about the long haul. It's about commitment, especially when things aren't easy. Following Jesus isn't built on convenience or quick rewards. It's about choosing to remain faithful even when life gets hard, when our faith doesn't feel as vibrant, or when the road seems long and actually tiring. Think about the people in your life who you would describe as faithful. Maybe it's a spouse or a close friend or someone in your faith community. What stands out about them? You know, there's something beautiful and powerful about faithfulness. It's steady, it's persistent, it's marked by a depth that withstands time and hardship. You know, faithfulness is one of the fruits of the Spirit, and it's not just a choice to, I'm going to stick with something. It's a characteristic of what it means to be like Jesus. You know, to love God and love people, not just in the easy moments, but through all of life's seasons. I love Eugene Peterson's once said quote. He said, "Faithfulness is a long obedience in the same direction." Isn't that good? It's not about how fast we go, but it's about staying the course. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't face challenges. In fact, Apostle Peter, in his letter to believers, reminds us that life will bring trials. They're guaranteed, but it's in those trials that our faithfulness can shine. Listen to 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 to 8. He writes, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now, for a little while, you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Though you've not seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with this inexpressible and glorious joy, for you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls." That was verses 8 to 9. You know, Peter is reminding us that faithfulness to God, it's actually rooted in something far greater than our temporary circumstances. What we can endure hardship because we have this, what we'll call the big picture in our mind, the promise of eternal life, the salvation of our souls. You know, that hope fuels our ability to stay faithful, even when things get tough. So, how can we be found faithful? I guess is the question. Well, first, by holding on to that big picture. Remember that this life is not all there is, it's just a part of something much greater. And second, by simply choosing to stay faithful in those small, everyday things, whether it's in our relationships or maybe at our work or in our walk with God. Faithfulness doesn't always feel glamorous. In fact, I would suggest it often does not feel glamorous or easy. There are days when it feels hard to keep going, when we don't see maybe the fruit of our labor or the benefit of being faithful, or when the struggle it actually just seems too great. We want to give up. But it's in those moments, that's the test of faithfulness right there, that faithfulness actually matters most when we remain steady and we remain steadfast and we reflect on the heart of God who is faithful to us, even when we falter and mess up. My encouragement to you is this: remain faithful. Keep following Jesus, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, even when you can't see him or understand what he's doing. See, the reward is greater than you can possibly imagine. And when we see him face to face one day, well, all the trials will be so worth it. Let's be people who others look to and say, they're faithful, not just in the good times, but in every season, because that kind of faithfulness, well, it brings peace, it brings strength, it brings courage to others. And that's who we're called to be.
Will you donate 2 hours of your time? Crossroads Prayer Center is seeking people with a heart willing to join in the amazing work God is doing through prayer. Providing over 1,300 prayer interactions daily, Crossroads Prayer Partners speak biblical truth and words of life over people's need. Join in God's transforming work through prayer and enrich your faith. Learn more at crossroads.ca/prayervolunteer.
Today as I was listening to Lindsay, I thought, there's some women in my life that I need to thank. Some women that were faithful Sunday school teachers, some women who encouraged me when I was a teenager who could have easily gone down the wrong track. Some women who have loved on me and helped me when I was raising my kids. Some women who have held leadership roles in lots of settings. Some women who were just friends that came alongside. Do you have some women that you need to thank? Maybe it's your maybe it's your mom, maybe it's a sister, a friend, an aunt. I think we need to encourage women in this day and age. It can be hard to be a woman inside and outside the church. So why don't we show gratitude to those in our lives? I hope you've learned a lot today. And if you're a woman or a man looking for encouragement, we're here for you. Our prayer lines are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call us at 1-855-910-6297. We are here to pray with and for you. And if you want to receive some daily encouragement through our devotional, go to theperspective.tv and you can sign up there for this beautiful devotional. You get a new one every month. So join the Perspective family. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to pray for you. And I hope in whatever you're going through that you say yes to Jesus. Let him be the leader of your life. He has good plans for you and he loves you. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.